Hi, I'm Anthony Brower. I'm with Gensler in our Los Angeles office, and between myself and a huge contingent from the AIA Los Angeles Committee on the Environment, we've been incorporating more and more sustainability requirements, not into just sustainability awards, but to all design awards. And we're going to walk through that process today. And like Corinne said, as we get to the end, if we have any questions, but this is really just going to be very tactical as we go through all these requirements. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the designer awards requirements. For some of you, we'll get into a little bit of the weeds on how to become a 2030 signatory. If you're already a 2030 signatory, you are, welcome to multitask while we kind of walk everybody else through some of that process, how to develop an action plan, and then some of the project submission and submission documentation examples we'll show as well. So just as a general overview, we're doing several things in addition to talking about top 10 measures. And it's not necessarily the entire measure, but it's pieces of measures that we want to incorporate because we want to make this process very simple, easy, and accessible for everyone. We've also started last year with really just focusing in on 2030, which aligns with, I think it's measure 6, which is the energy measure. So Architecture 2030 is a nonprofit organization. The 2030 Challenge was issued by Architecture 2030, and the AIA 2030 commitment is actually the AIA's tool to track that challenge. What we're adding, and that was all, the requirements I'm going to show you related to 2030 were all required last year, and this year is a yes and approach. So we're continuing with the 2030 requirements, and we're going to start layering in some selected top 10 measures, really to enhance the impact of the award series. So some of the basics. One, your firm needs to be a signatory of the 2030 commitment in order to qualify to submit projects. If you're not a 2030 signatory, you can't submit for projects. However, it is really easy to do, and we'll go through that in a little bit. Second requirement, and these now is where we start getting into requirements that affect your award status. So we're asking for energy performance metrics, which are required for built projects to be eligible for honor status. Projects without energy metrics, if you don't have those energy metrics, you can still submit for an award, but your project will only be eligible for merit or citation status. Now, the third layer, so that was required last year. We're continuing that requirement this year, and now we're adding one new requirement this year. And because of when we looked at we're trying to figure out what we were going to add, we would say, hey, it's really big. We want to put a really big focus on water conservation. We want to put a big focus on embodied carbon. And those were kind of the big two things we wanted to do next. But in looking at projects, we didn't want this to be a limiter. So we actually took this, either or approach. You can either focus on water conservation, and we're looking for your project has to include only landscape plantings without irrigation for all outdoor site improvements. If you can't satisfy that on your project, or you don't have outdoor plantings, you're going to shift. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to focus on embodied carbon. So buildings must have performed a life cycle analysis to quantify the embodied carbon of the building materials. Now, in putting those two together, we're like, okay, well, let's make sure that we're not excluding any interiors projects. So interiors projects don't always have exterior spaces. A smaller budget on an interiors project might mean you might not have the fee and budget or time to do an embodied carbon analysis. So as an alternate for an interiors project, you can just demonstrate that you've achieved a minimum of a 25% lighting power density below your local code. And I'll get into if you're doing ASHRAE, if your interiors code is ASHRAE 2007, you have to be 25% below that. If you are Title 24, you're 25% below that. So it's 25% below whatever your local code is for that project. There are a few exemptions. So cityscapes and installations for both built and next, those typologies, they're not required. They don't have to provide energy metrics. So there's not going to be any honor award exclusions. Interiors projects. So interiors projects have less energy metrics to track. Therefore, you only have to track lighting power density. And we'll walk through all of the energy metrics in a little bit. And no conditioned space. If you're submitting something that is an outdoor space and there's no conditioned space anywhere on the project, you're also not required to. You're exempt from the 2030 metrics submission portion of that. However, we've seen this before, and we've said it before, and we'll say it again. Claiming that there's no conditioned space when there is will be noticed. I'm not going to say that the jurors will frown upon it, but they may. There was definitely commentary on, submissions that looked like they were kind of trying to skirt the rules. We're just looking for honesty and transparency from everybody. Let's keep this up to the very rigorous standards that AIA has. So, getting into the requirements. So again, all submitting firms must be a signatory of the 2030 commitment. So all architecture firms connected with the project submission need to be a signatory. And I'm kind of repeating this several times, and I'm going to say it one more time. When we say all, we mean all. If you have a project that includes an executive architect, an architect of record, and a design architect, all three firms need to be a 2030 signatory. There's not going to be one firm that's going to carry the signatory on their back. All three firms need to be a signatory for that project to be eligible for submission. Now, becoming a signatory is actually really easy. It's just a very few step process to kind of get your firm on board. You're going to sign a commitment letter. I mean, the mission of this 2030 commitment is really to support the Architecture 2030 Challenge. And we really just want you to participate. We're trying to encourage participation in this program. So we all know buildings account for 40% of greenhouse gas emissions today, but they don't have to. We need to start tracking our progress. If you're not a 2030 signatory, go online to the 2030 Challenge. You can create a personal account. It's just a very quick 3-step process. You're either going to join or create your firm profile. If your firm's not a signatory, you'll have to create the profile. Multiple users are able to link to your firm profile, which is why it's a separate step for the individual account versus the firm account. And there's a video linked here, and Corinne's going to share this PDF after the session on this how-to video, how to create a company. And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to upload a commitment letter. So it's something that your firm's going to provide. The AIA actually has on their website I think probably just one. They may have a few sample commitment letters. You can download that, put it on your firm letterhead, make adjustments where you feel necessary, and you're going to upload that to your firm profile. Now, when we're looking for one of the submission requirements is you have to upload in submittable, which is the questions on submittable, Corey, and I'll get to it in the Q&A. You have to upload proof of your 2030 signatory status, which is nothing more than making a PDF of your firm profile page. So this is an example of Gensler's firm profile page. It just says, hey, here's Gensler, here's our basic information, how many employees we have, who the admin point of contact is. It shows that we're a signatory and for how long. It shows that the commitment letter is in the AIA system. And it shows that we have our sustainability action plan completed and uploaded. It's been there for quite a while. It's in the system. These two requirements on the right, you do not need to upload the signatory letter. Our team doing the review does not want your signatory letter at all. Please do not upload it. All we want is a snapshot of this screen showing that you've completed the process and you're a signatory.
So Anthony, I'm just going to sneak in there really quick to say that this was one of the biggest errors last year, is that most, I don't know, maybe 30% of people uploaded their letter, which was, it's a nice letter, but we don't need to see that. So it wasn't a problem. We just ended up telling people to resubmit, but it's just a lot of extra work when we have almost 300 submissions. So please make sure to follow this step of just uploading the screenshot of your that you are a signatory.
Right. And again, just taking a screenshot of this, making it a PDF, If you do have multiple firms, you have 2 or 3 architecture firms working on a project, that's the easiest way. Just make it a 2 or 3 page PDF with one screenshot for each of the signatory proofs. Now, the sustainability action plan, if you are new to the 2030 commitment and you're just now going to register this year, once you become a signatory, the expectation is you're going to create an action plan within 6 months of becoming a signatory. So again, you are not required to upload or show proof of a developed action plan. That is not required. It's up there. I'm actually including this link here just for your information so that you can start thinking about what that action plan for your firm is. We do not need that action plan, nor does it need to be shown to be uploaded on this previous snapshot. And then the last step is actually to start reporting projects. AI works on a calendar year basis. There's several ways to upload projects. You can do them one at a time. You can give individual people in your firm access to accounts and they can upload projects as they go. Or for larger firms, Gensler's a larger firm, we actually do a batch upload once a year, and it's for our previous calendar year's work. So we just uploaded our 2021 portfolio of all of our active projects into the AIA portal. This is only required for built projects to show their project was submitted in the DDX platform. Now, once you submit a project, we're asking for that same thing. We're asking for you to just take an image snapshot of your project in the DDX platform. This is an example of one of the projects in our system. I know a question came up last year about, how do we submit projects when we have confidentiality requirements with our clients? And what we do, and it's just the easiest way that we can get around this, we submit our projects without giving any information about the name of the project. We don't list the client. We don't list anything other than, hey, I'm saying this is a non-residential project and this is Gensler's internal project accounting number. And that's the easiest way that we can do it so that we're not sharing our client's information. So again, this is the snapshot of an individual project. So there's 2 different types of metrics we're looking for buildings. We're looking for energy EUI, or energy use intensity. It's very simply the amount of energy that is required to operate the building divided by the square footage, which is this metric of kBTU per square foot per year. Should be important to note, and we listed on this slide, when you talk to your project engineers to get this data, you're going to ask them for raw EUI numbers. You do not want the Title 24 calculations because they include what we call TDV, or time-dependent valuation, which factors in the cost of energy. We don't want the cost of energy factored in. It balloons and escalates the numbers and it creates inconsistencies. We just want the raw EUI value. And if you look at AI 2030's reporting, and what they're comparing numbers to, they're comparing it to CBEX 2003, which uses raw EUI data without this time-dependent valuation. So you have to be very deliberate when you talk to your engineer that you do not want time-dependent valuation metrics. And you want 2 metrics. You want a baseline. Actually, I think we give you a field for 3 metrics. A baseline metric, which is essentially your building as if designed per code. Your as designed, which is here's the actual systems we installed, because that's going to show a demonstrated improvement. And then we ask for a net EUI value. And if you've installed solar on the project, the net EUI accounts for solar. If you do not have solar or on-site renewables on your project, then your predicted and your net EUI are going to be the same exact numbers. So you're going to have a baseline and 2 predicted and net, which would be the same 2 numbers. We put this graphic together just kind of give a range. There is no one EUI value that every project is measured against, because they're all very dependent on the type of use the space is. Fast food restaurants are on the very high end. You can see an EUI anywhere between 170 and 300. While you look at parking garages, you can see anything between 2 and 13. This could be very useful as a slide to share with your engineer. Or if you don't share it with your engineer and they send you back, let's say you're submitting an office, a commercial office space, and they give you an EUI of 275, when the range should be somewhere between 30 and 60. And forgive me, these are Title 24 compliance ranges. I don't have one of these for ASHRAE 2007, but it won't be too far north of that. But if your engineer gives you a number of 250 or 300 for an office, that is a very quick signifier that they gave you time-dependent valuation number, a TDV value, and you need to go back to them and say, look, we just need the raw EUI. Should be somewhere in that range. Now, it doesn't mean that it's 65, it's wrong. There's a certain amount of fudge factor here. I tried to give these a big enough swing that your number should fall within this range, but if it's a little bit set, lower is always better. If it's a little bit higher than the range, that's fine. And it becomes very specific. You could have if you have a project that has multiple uses, it's going to be a mix of these, and depending on the mix of the use is going to kind of drive where your number lands. Lighting power density, I think, is much easier for everybody to understand. It's your total installed wattage divided by your square footage. Strangely, we have two ways to calculate this. You can either, and your engineers will be very familiar with this, it's either a whole building, which is total wattage divided by square foot, or there's another way that our engineering partners and lighting designer partners calculate this. They do it space by space. So they get, additional allowance. A corridor is only a half a watt a square foot. A conference room is 1.3 watts per square foot. You kind of bring all of that together in a space specific method and bring it together. And then you got your baseline and your design lighting power density. EUI values are only required for building projects. They are not required for interiors projects. Building projects must submit both values. And I put this chart quickly together to talk about, here's the range that you're probably going to see, at least on Title 24, for parking garages, office space, industrial manufacturing. You're not going to use these numbers. You're going to go into your local, whatever your local code is, you're going to use that code value as your baseline, and then whatever your design value is as your design value for lighting power density. And then just to underscore the importance of some of these metrics, I just want to give everybody a snapshot of something that we're seeing on a very large scale. Some of our clients are actually, when they send us an RFP, they're asking us for examples of projects that we've completed. And the message that we're hearing is this client, for example, is telling us, we want to see examples of projects that you've completed that have an EUI of 35 or less. They're enhancing that message, or they're going further with that message to say, if you don't have the metrics, you don't qualify to bid on our work. If you don't know the metrics, you don't qualify to bid on our work. If you don't want to share the metrics, you don't qualify to bid on our work. And it's really just getting to the point where our clients are expecting this. It's now an expectation. Not all of our clients are doing this, but we are seeing them. So it's going to become something that could potentially limit us from submitting. Another thing that we're seeing in this same ask is every time that we respond to an RFP, we're usually getting case studies. They don't want to see, this particular client doesn't want to see case studies of any projects that don't meet this threshold. So it's really getting down to the point that transparency is becoming king in the industry. Our clients are becoming very sophisticated around that. And they're expecting us to show them what we've already completed and doing to this. A couple of myths and a couple of facts around the AI 2030 commitment. So some people say it takes too much time. Actually, it doesn't. The typical time to gather and input data is really less than 30 minutes for projects. Now, by the time you can ask the question of your engineer, it might take them a day to get back to you. I'm not counting for the time that it takes somebody to respond to an email, but it doesn't take a lot of time to gather this information. It doesn't require a lot of resources. This program is free. You're going to wind up joining a network of peers if you have questions to reach out to. Some firms may be concerned that they have poor performing projects in your portfolio. When you submit to 2030, all the data is aggregated and anonymous. AI doesn't share your confidential client data with anybody, and anything that does come out of their annual reports is aggregated data. It's actually not even firm specific when the data is released. I have to achieve the 2030 target. That is not true. Making progress is much more important than just meeting the target. You can submit projects to the 2030 commitment that do not meet the current target. I believe the current target is 80% below CBEX and 25% below ASHRAE 2007 for lighting power density. you can't improve what you don't measure. We're trying to get the industry, and AI, at least these two groups have been for a long time, and trying to get us all into the method of reporting. We all talk, whenever anybody asks any of us, the architect's typical answer is what's your favorite project? It's always the next one. We need to start shifting a little bit of that mindset to hang around on that project long enough to start tracking our data. And your project does not need to be complete. 2030 is a framework to set energy targets early in the design process and track project progress at each phase. So if you can submit a project to 2030 in the very early stages when you just know your design EUI values, and then later on, after you're done with construction documents and after you're done with construction, you update that data. And that's it for a very quick overview.